My grandmother always made the same pot roast for her birthday dinner. It was the one night every year where the whole family squeezed into her tiny house in Naperville, Illinois, elbows touching across the fold-out table, everyone pretending they liked each other more than they did. I usually looked forward to it. Last October, I was dreading it before I even pulled out of my driveway. My cousin had just been promoted. Not just any promotion. She had been hired as the new vice president of operations at a tech startup called Lumen Digital, and in the 3 weeks since her offer letter arrived, she had managed to bring it up in every family group chat, every phone call, every text thread. She sent a photo of her new business cards. She sent a photo of her new office. She sent a photo of herself at what appeared to be a very ordinary Tuesday morning, standing next to a very ordinary coffee machine, captioned VP Life. I didn't respond to any of it. I just read the messages and put my phone face down on my kitchen counter. My mother called me 2 days before the birthday dinner to remind me, as she always did, that my cousin worked very hard to get where she is, and that it would be nice if I could be a little more enthusiastic. She didn't say it outright, but she didn't need to. The implication hung between us like it always did that I, by contrast, had not worked hard, had not gotten anywhere, and therefore had very little to be enthusiastic about. I told her I'd be there. What my mother didn't know, what almost nobody in my family knew, was that I had invested in Lumen Digital 14 months earlier. Not as an employee, not as a contractor, as an equity holder. Through my holding company, Clearwater Capital Group, I owned 38% of Lumen Digital's outstanding shares. I had led the seed round when the two founders, a pair of engineers named Derek and Marcus, came to me through a mutual contact. I had reviewed their deck, spent 3 weeks on due diligence, and written them a check that let them hire their first 6 employees. I was, on paper, their single largest outside investor. I knew this. Derek knew this. Marcus knew this. The company's attorneys knew this. The board knew this. My cousin did not know this. She knew me as the family member who lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park, who drove a 6-year-old Civic, who wore the same rotation of jeans and flannels to every family event, and who, according to the general consensus, had never really figured out what she was doing with her life. I was a freelance tech consultant, or at least that's what I told people when they asked. It was easier than explaining the rest. I pulled into my grandmother's driveway at exactly 6 o'clock. My aunt's car was already there, and so was my cousin's a white Lexus she'd gotten herself as a promotion gift. It still had that particular gleam of a car recently cleaned for an occasion. I sat in my Civic for a moment before going in. I want to be clear about something. I am not, by nature, a confrontational person. I don't enjoy watching people fail. I don't fantasize about dramatic moments. In my experience, real power is quiet, and people who truly have it rarely feel the need to announce it. My cousin was about to learn that lesson in the most personal way possible, but that wasn't something I had planned or arranged. What was coming was entirely of her own making. I was just going to be in the room when it arrived. I went inside. My grandmother hugged me at the door and told me I looked thin, which is how she said hello to everyone she loved. The kitchen smelled like pot roast and the particular brand of candle she'd burned every holiday for 30 years. My mother was already at the table. My aunt was refilling her wine glass. My cousin was standing in the middle of the living room, still in her coat, telling a story to anyone who would listen. She stopped when I came in. "Lauren," she said, and her smile had that particular quality it always had when she looked at me, warm on the surface, slightly elevated underneath, the way you smile at a child who's done something cute, but not particularly impressive. "I was wondering when you'd get here." "Traffic," I said, which was not true. I had timed my arrival deliberately to avoid having to stand around making small talk. She was wearing a blazer over a silk blouse. Her hair was done. She had, I noticed, already positioned herself at the head of the table by the time we sat down to eat, which was my grandmother's seat. My grandmother, bless her, just moved to the other end without saying a word. Dinner started well enough. My grandmother talked about her neighbor's new dog. My aunt talked about a trip she was planning. My mother asked me 3 times in different ways whether I was seeing anyone, which I answered 3 times in different ways that I was not. The pot roast was good. The rolls were good. I drank my wine slowly and kept my phone in my pocket. It was around the time my grandmother brought out the birthday cake that my cousin shifted gears. She had been building to something all evening. I could see it in the way she kept steering the conversation back to Lumen Digital, kept finding ways to mention her title, kept casually dropping the company's revenue projections into sentences that had nothing to do with revenue projections. By the time the candles were lit, she had the room's attention arranged exactly where she wanted it. "I have to say," she said, leaning back in her chair with the particular confidence of someone who has been rehearsing this moment, "the timing of this promotion could not have been better. I've spent 3 weeks really digging into operations at Lumen, and I have a very clear picture now of what needs to change." My aunt asked what she meant. My cousin smiled. "The founding team," she said, in the tone of someone explaining something obvious to someone who should have already understood it, "built a great early product, but they are not operators. They are not growth stage leaders. They are holding the company back, and honestly, the board knows it. They're just waiting for someone with the spine to make the hard call." The table was quiet for a moment. "What hard call?" my mother asked. "Both of them need to go," my cousin said simply. "Derek and Marcus. They're founders, not executives. They'll be happier in an advisory capacity, or not in the company at all." She paused. "I'm going to recommend their removal at the next board meeting. Clean slate. And when that happens, I become the natural choice for CEO. The board's already suggested as much." She picked up her fork. "There's also a very significant performance bonus tied to operational restructuring. 6 figures. So the timing is, you know." She smiled again. "Very good." My grandmother asked if someone could pass the salt. I had been listening to all of this with what I can only describe as an almost meditative calm. I was holding my wine glass. I was looking at my cousin, and somewhere beneath the surface of that calm, a very specific and entirely familiar feeling was taking shape. The feeling I always got when someone said something in front of me that they would deeply regret having said in front of me. I did not say anything yet. I set my glass down. I helped my grandmother with the birthday cake. I ate a slice of chocolate frosting and vanilla sponge, and I stayed very, very quiet. It was my aunt who asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Lauren, you do tech stuff, right? Is that how it works? Can a VP just remove the founders?" My cousin answered before I could. "It depends on the board structure," she said, in the same slightly elevated tone. "But in this case, yes, the founders are employees at this point. They don't have enough voting shares to block a board decision. It's already been mapped out." I looked at my aunt. "She's generally right about the mechanics," I said. "It depends on the shareholder agreement and how the voting rights are structured." My cousin glanced at me. "Exactly," she said, with a faint note of surprise that I'd said anything useful. I said, and I picked up my wine glass again. Here is what I knew that she did not. The Lumen Digital shareholder agreement, which I had helped structure, and which my attorneys had spent considerable time on, contained a provision that any removal of a founding team member required approval from a supermajority of the board, which meant, in practice, that no such vote could pass without the explicit consent of the company's largest outside shareholder, which was me. My 38% stake, held through Clearwater Capital Group, gave me effective veto power over any major structural decision, including executive removal. Under the terms of the agreement, my cousin had apparently not fully read, or perhaps had not been shown, or perhaps had been told didn't matter by whoever was whispering in her ear about board dynamics. I had a board meeting in 11 days. I knew Derek and Marcus. I had lunch with Derek 3 weeks ago. I had been copied on every investor update for 14 months. I knew the company's financials better than most of its employees, and I can tell you with complete certainty that the board had not suggested to anyone that the founders should be removed. That narrative had originated somewhere else entirely. I did not say any of this at my grandmother's dinner table. My grandmother blew out her candles. We sang to her. My cousin posted a photo of the cake to her Instagram stories with the caption, "Family Time," and went back to talking about her plan for Lumen's organizational structure in Q1. I washed the dishes. I drove home in my 6-year-old Civic. I was in bed by 10. What happened over the next 11 days happened quickly, and I want to walk through it carefully because the details matter. On the Monday after the birthday dinner, I received a forwarded email from Marcus. It was a message my cousin had sent to the company's outside counsel, CCing the 2 other board members, outlining a proposed agenda for the upcoming board meeting. The agenda included, under item 4, a formal motion to transition Derek and Marcus from executive roles to advisory positions, effective immediately following the meeting, pending board approval. Marcus's message to me contained 3 words: "Are you seeing this?" I called him. "I've seen it," I said. "What do you want to do?" I thought about it for a moment. "Let the meeting happen," I said. "Don't respond to the agenda yet. I'll be there." He was quiet for a second. "She doesn't know, does she?" "No," I said. "Okay," he said. "Okay. I want to explain something about why I had kept my investment in Lumen quiet from my family. It wasn't a secret I maintained out of embarrassment or strategy. It was a boundary I had established very deliberately, a long time ago, after watching what happened when my family knew about my finances. When I had money, I was asked for it. When I had success, it became a measuring stick that everyone else was either held to or used against me. I had learned, through experience, that the simplest way to have a peaceful family life was to let them think I was doing fine but unremarkably so. It kept expectations low and conversations simple. My cousin had taken that simplicity and mistaken it for an invitation to look down on me. That was her choice. I had never corrected it because it never used to cost me anything. Now it was about to cost her quite a lot. The day before the board meeting, I got a call from my mother. My cousin had apparently mentioned to my aunt that she had a very significant board meeting coming up and that it was going to be a major turning point for her career. My aunt had told my mother. My mother was calling me because she thought, in the way mothers sometimes do, that I might want to send a card or a supportive text. It would mean a lot to her, my mother said. I told my mother I'd think about it. That evening, I pulled up the shareholder agreement one more time, not because I needed to review it, but because I found it grounding to look at the specific language. The clause I cared about was on page 17, 38%, supermajority requirement, founder protection provisions. My signature at the bottom, dated 14 months ago, next to the name of my holding company, Clearwater Capital Group. I set my laptop on the coffee table. I made a cup of tea. I watched the news for a while. I went to sleep at a reasonable hour. The board meeting was at 9 in the morning on a Thursday at Lumen's offices, which were on the 14th floor of a building in the West Loop. I had been to those offices twice, once when Derek and Marcus were first setting up and needed my input on their lease terms, and once for a portfolio review 6 months ago. Neither time had my cousin been working there. I wore a dark blazer and slacks. I drove downtown and parked in the building's garage. I took the elevator to 14. The receptionist at the front desk asked my name, and I gave it. She looked at her screen, looked back up at me, and then looked at her screen again. I watched her try to reconcile something. "Lauren Chen?" she said. "Yes," I said. "From Clearwater Capital?" "That's right." She made a call. I waited. My cousin came around the corner 40 seconds later. She was wearing a blazer that I recognized from an Instagram post. She stopped when she saw me. Her expression did something complicated, the kind of expression a person's face makes when the information arriving in their brain does not match any of the categories they have prepared for it. "Lauren," she said. "Good morning," I said. Why are you here?" "Board meeting," I said. "I have a standing invitation." I paused. "I'm the Clearwater Capital seat." The silence that followed was one of those silences that seems much longer than it actually is. I watched her process it. I watched the specific sequence of realizations that Clearwater Capital was the company's largest outside shareholder, that the largest outside shareholder had veto power under the shareholder agreement, that the largest outside shareholder was me, and that I had been sitting across from her at my grandmother's birthday dinner 6 days ago while she described her plan to remove the founders and collect a 6-figure bonus, and I had said nothing except, "It depends on the shareholder agreement." Her face went through 3 distinct colors. "I didn't know," she said finally. "I know you didn't," I said. I walked past her, toward the conference room. The meeting itself was businesslike and brief. Derek and Marcus were there. The 2 other board members, a venture partner named Elise and a former executive named Robert, were there. My cousin was there. I took my usual seat at the table. When item 4 on the agenda came up, my cousin presented her proposal. She spoke for about 7 minutes. She used phrases like operationally mature leadership and transition to a growth stage structure and board-aligned decision. She was composed. She had clearly prepared. She did not look at me once during those 7 minutes. When she finished, Elise asked if there were any questions before discussion. I said I had one. Under Section 9(4) of the shareholder agreement, I said, any vote to remove a founding team member requires supermajority approval, including the Class B preferred holder. I paused. I hold that position, and I don't support this motion. My cousin looked at me. The company is performing well, I continued. The founding team has delivered on every milestone in the original investment thesis. I've reviewed the Q3 numbers. I've reviewed the product roadmap. I don't see a performance basis for this proposal, and I don't see a structural reason that justifies the risk of a leadership transition right now. I set my pen down. I'm voting no. Elise nodded slowly. Robert made a note on his legal pad. My cousin said, very quietly, "You can't just—" "She can," Derek said. He said it without looking at her. The motion failed. Item 5 was a discussion of the Q4 marketing budget, which was entirely routine. The meeting ended at 10:40. In the hallway afterward, my cousin found me at the elevator bank. She looked like someone who had been awake since 4 in the morning, which, knowing her, she probably had been. "How long?" she said. 14 months, I said. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I looked at her for a moment. "Because my financial life is not a topic I discuss at family dinners," I said. "It's a boundary I've kept for a long time. I'm sorry you didn't know, but I also want to be honest with you. Even if you had known, the answer would have been the same." She was quiet. "Derek and Marcus built something real," I said. "They work hard. They've earned what they have here. I'm not going to vote to remove them so that someone else can collect a restructuring bonus." I paused. "That's not a personal statement. That's just how I make investment decisions." The elevator arrived. I stepped in. "Lauren," she said. I held the door. "I told the whole family," she said. Her voice had gone very flat. "About becoming CEO, about the bonus. I told everyone." "I know," I said quietly. The door closed. "I want to tell you what happened after, because I think it's important. My cousin did not get fired. She remained in her VP of Operations role. The bonus tied to the restructuring was simply not paid out because the restructuring did not occur. Derek sent me an email that afternoon that said only thank you, and I replied, of course. Marcus called me that evening and we talked for about an hour about the Q4 roadmap, and somewhere in the middle of that conversation, he laughed and said, "I genuinely cannot believe she didn't know." And I said, "I know," and we both let that sit there for a second. My mother called me 4 days later. She had heard from my aunt, who had heard from my cousin. I don't know how much of the story had survived the telephone chain intact, but enough of it had. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" my mother asked, and there was something in her voice that was not quite hurt. It was more like the feeling of realizing that the picture you've had of something for a long time was drawn with the wrong proportions. "Because I didn't want my finances to be a topic at family dinner," I said. "I still don't, but people thought." She paused. "People were treating you like I hadn't figured things out," I said. "I know. I let them think that. That was my choice." My mother was quiet for a long time. "Are you okay?" she finally asked. "I'm fine," I said. "I've always been fine." I meant it. Not as a defense and not as a performance, I genuinely meant it. My apartment is small and I like it that way. My car is 6 years old and it has never once given me a problem. I wear jeans and flannels because they're comfortable, and I'm not trying to communicate anything to anyone. I have never needed the people around me to know what I have or what I can do. That has always been enough. What I want to tell you, and this is the thing I keep coming back to, is that my cousin is not a villain in this story. She is someone who got a significant opportunity and let it expand her sense of what she was owed. That's a human thing. I understand it. I don't carry any bitterness about what she said at that dinner table, because what she said at that dinner table was said in front of the one person who could do something about it. That's not my design. That's just what happened. She called me herself about 2 weeks later. I missed the call and called her back the same evening. "I owe you an apology," she said. "You don't have to." "I do," she said. "Not for the board thing. You were right about the board thing. I owe you an apology for a long time of treating you like you were somehow less than me. I've been thinking about it a lot. And I'm sorry. I didn't say anything immediately. I thought you hadn't figured it out, she said. I thought I was ahead of you. And I was completely wrong about everything. You weren't wrong about everything, I said. You're genuinely good at operations. Elise mentioned that to me separately. You see things structurally in a way that's valuable. I paused. You just aimed it in the wrong direction. She laughed a short, tired laugh. That's generous. It's accurate, I said. We talked for about 20 minutes. Not about Lumen, not about the board, not about the bonus that never happened. We talked about our grandmother's pot roast recipe, which she had apparently decided she wanted to learn. We talked about a trip she was thinking about taking in the spring. By the end of the call, she sounded more like herself, not the version of herself that had been VP of operations for 3 weeks and was performing it at a family birthday dinner, but the version I'd grown up with, the one who used to make me laugh when we were teenagers, and who I had genuinely liked before success made her strange. I don't know what the future holds for Lumen Digital. I think it will do well. I think Derek and Marcus will figure it out, and I think my cousin, if she can redirect what she's good at, might actually be a real asset to them. Time will tell. What I know for certain is this. The most powerful thing I have ever done in my professional life is let people underestimate me. Not because I enjoy the moment when they discover they were wrong, though I would be lying if I said that moment in the elevator lobby didn't stay with me for a while, but because operating quietly, without the weight of other people's expectations, or envy, or assumptions pressing against your decisions, is genuinely freeing. I have built things I'm proud of in that freedom. I intend to keep building them. My grandmother called me the Sunday after everything settled. She didn't know the details, and I didn't tell her. She called because she wanted to know if I had tried her pot roast recipe yet, and whether I thought it needed more rosemary. I told her it was perfect the way it was. She said, "Everything always is, if you let it alone long enough." I wrote that down after I hung up. I keep it on a note card above my desk, next to my monitor, next to the quiet running spreadsheets that track the thing I built when nobody was watching.